Now, a New Zealand professor at the University of Canterbury, Dr. Anne-Marie Brady, has spent more than 2 decades analysing the Chinese Communist Party. She's a world-renowned expert on the subject, but there has been a very personal cost to her lifetime work exposing CCP infiltration and tactics. She's been the subject of intimidation campaigns in her time, multiple burglaries, and 2 of her colleagues have been killed in an accident in June in potentially suspicious circumstances. Yet Professor Brady refuses to be intimidated, and she continues her important world-leading work researching the extent of Chinese government infiltration in Western democracies. She joins me live now from New Zealand. Thank you very much for your time, and I'm so thrilled you're on the show.
Kia ora. Nice to talk with you, Sherry.
Now, Professor, there was a major leak this week of a Chinese company, Zhenhua Data, that's been collecting open source intelligence on 2.4 million people around the world, something like 360,000 organisations as well. Cybersecurity experts Robert Potter and Chris Balding obtained this leak from a whistleblower, and I've interviewed them this week on Sky during the week about it. But it's now been reported that even some people who don't have a presence on the internet are among those who have been targeted by this surveillance. Initially, we thought this was just open source. How does this happen?
Well, it's not yet clear how did Zhenhua get all the names on their data set, but some of it could be from hacking, some of it could be from intelligence work, and subsequent to having a base of names, then they would have been doing data scraping. So TVNZ in New Zealand did a really good report on the Zhenhua data set and the various Pacific Island nations and the names that we found in the data set on each country. And that's where it was discovered that there were people there who had no internet presence at all, and in fact in countries that have almost no internet availability for the ordinary person. So that leads the question of who is gathering that data to begin with. But Sherry, I've looked at the whole data base, and over 80% of the subject headings are related to the United States. So obviously that's a key focus. But what's really interesting to me is the attention to all the rest of the world, because every state and every territory of the world has a list of names within this data set. I even found the Vatican. At first I thought, where is the Vatican? But there they were, right within the Italian data set. And New Caledonia, which is a French territory, and French Polynesia, also a territory of France, they have a data set within this big database. So it tells us the breathtaking scale of Chinese foreign policy.
This company, Zhenhua Data, has claimed on its website before it was taken down that among its clients has been Chinese intelligence, the Communist Party, the PLA, and has been described as a military contractor. What is your understanding about what they would be doing with this sort of information, having intelligence assessment profiles of so many people around the world who they deem to be influential?
Yes, so in a recent op-ed, I've described it as a prequel. If you love Harry Potter, the Harry Potter series, and then you got to read the prequel before Harry Potter of how his mum and dad got together. That's the equivalent of what we're seeing with this database of what happens before political interference activities occur. So I and many other of my peers who studied the Chinese Communist Party have detailed in the last 2 years how various democracies from New Zealand to Australia, Germany, the UK, and the United States are experiencing political interference activities from the CCP, from whether it's the targeted campaign donations to our political parties, which are essentially coming from China via proxy groups, or MPs who are representing the CCP rather than their own constituencies. And this data set shows us before how individuals get targeted. And some of the clue is in the titles within the data set for how individuals are categorised. they're categorised as either politically exposed personages or special interest personages. Now, in financial risk, politically exposed personages are people with political influence or political power who are, because of their profile, believed to be more at risk for bribery or corruption. And so people in those positions and their family members are regarded as higher risk financially. And so they're of interest. Potentially, some of these names could have been taken from a database identifying people who were at risk of corruption.
Very, very concerning revelations. Just in terms of political interference, you've got the New Zealand election coming up in a couple of weeks. Do you think there's been interference in it so far? And if so, in what way?
Well, we've got people looking at the English language media and social media, and they're finding not a lot so far, which is good. And there's been a study released on that. I have a student who's looking at the Chinese language media, and certainly the tone is more cautious and less blatant than it was in our previous election, because I think people this time around, people know that you will be tracked. So I think things are a little bit more subtle this time around, but not that much more subtle. It's a very we don't have any media laws in New Zealand other than defamation and those kind of laws. So there isn't a law asking the media to be non-biased. They self-police, and there's very little ability to police the self-policing. The Chinese language media in New Zealand is not a member of the press council, the media council. So any complaints to them are quite hard to enforce.
Yeah.
But Sherry, I just want to say one further thing about the Zhenhua database. What has been recovered is 10% of the 2.4 million. So I know that a lot of journalists are looking at the individual data sets, and people saying, there's some random names in there. Each name represents a part of somebody's network, somebody's circle. So you have to identify who's the heart of that circle, who's the politically exposed personage who's linked to that information. So it's pieces of puzzle that we're trying to put together. The Zhenhua database is a window on a much bigger story, but it's really important.
Absolutely, and there's so many other layers of surveillance going on. Before you go, Professor Brady, I just want to ask, something I referred to in my introduction about the personal cost to you of exposing the Chinese influence. You've yourself been the subject to a campaign of intimidation. Some of your colleagues have been visited by the MSS. You've had other colleagues, democracy fighters, who've been killed in a car accident in suspicious circumstances. How do you keep going on and doing your work and researching and exposing this when the personal cost has clearly been so great?
Well, I have been doing research in China since 1990. And I know that, it was very disconcerting when the first things happened in New Zealand. But I came to realise what they were meant to intimidate. So I win by not being afraid. So that's how I do it. Mind over matter. And still here today. And the people who, the brave people like Freeman Yu, who's seriously injured in the car crash, and Shi Guo and Walutin, they're also incredibly brave people, and they inspire me. Today I've just seen an amazing film that I recommend to everyone called Ma Jiawan, which is about someone who is a Falun Gong practitioner who was imprisoned in a labour education camp, and he wrote a letter that was put into a Christmas decoration and not a Christmas decoration, a Halloween decoration, and discovered in 2012. And it's a story of a person with great integrity and courage. And there are many people like him in China, and they give me courage too. So I actually feel honoured that I have the position that I have, and that I can use that platform and in my country, that we have laws of academic freedom, and that the critic and conscience role of the academic is actually in my job contract in New Zealand. So we're fortunate to have the society that's been built by our forebears, and in this time, all of us should be using all of our democratic rights to protect and preserve our democracy and to hold our political leaders to account, and to, in the end, one of the key challenges for us is about getting the China relationship right.
Absolutely.
Thanks very much.
Professor Brady, thank you. Really appreciate your time tonight, and stay safe.